Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there, welcome back. I'm so grateful you have chosen to be here today. Whether you've been with me for a while or this is your first time listening, I appreciate you joining me for this conversation. A few reminders before we get started. I've been talking for a bit now about changes that would be forthcoming in the fall of 2024. And well, that time has arrived, beginning with this episode of the podcast. It's being released on a new day and time, Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern Time now. And more changes and news of new things will be rolling out over the course of this month. And while I know change can be difficult and hard for so many people, it's my hope that you will embrace these changes as we continue to learn about the changes that life requires of us every day, right? Especially when we find ourselves in the middle of estrangement and or reconciliation. So maybe consider this as practice, right? And accepting what is in the here and now today and sitting in maybe some uncomfortable feelings that we preferred that over this or those types of thoughts, and allow it to kind of unfold and see where it leads you, right? I think there's value in that. And I think it can serve to help all of our relationships in a variety of different ways. And finally, the validation workshop. It's coming up in a week and a half, Sunday, October 13th, from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be on Zoom. No, it will not be recorded. And I do that out of confidentiality. My workshops are very interactive, and I want people to feel safe enough to be vulnerable and share what they need to share and ask the questions they need to ask to get the support that they're searching for. So if you'd like to register for that workshop, please send me an email to theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Registration closes the evening of Friday, the 11th of October. So the Friday before the workshop on Sunday. And I believe that is it for reminders. So today we're talking about something that comes up often in my work with estranged moms. That feeling of, I did everything to make her life better, so why can't she appreciate it? Or another version, I gave them everything I didn't have. Why don't they see that? I know that this is a painful question, one that carries a lot of emotional weight. You've given so much to your daughter or adult children, provided opportunities, support, and everything you didn't have growing up. And now, here you are. You have found yourself in this place of estrangement, wondering what in the hell went wrong. Why can't they see how much you've done for them? To start today, I want to share a quote that I think sets the stage for our discussion. When we become parents, we often think of what we needed in our childhood and promise to provide that for our own children. But in doing so, we may forget that our children are not carbon copies of ourselves. Isn't that a powerful quote? I mean, really sit with that and think about that for a moment. Let me repeat it. When we become parents, we often think about what we needed in our childhood and promise to provide that for our own children. But in doing so, we may forget that our children are not carbon copies of ourselves. As parents, every parent that I know wants to fill the gaps that we experienced in our own childhoods. But in doing that, we forget that our children may need something completely different because they are not little us, right? In essence, we're kind of wanting to live our life out through them by giving them things that we want slash wanted and didn't get. So today we're going to talk about this disconnect. Why is it that despite all you've done to make your adult child's life better, there's still estrangement? Why does it feel like they don't appreciate everything you've given to them? I see this dynamic play out with almost every estranged parent I work with. Many mothers tell me, I gave her everything I didn't have. I wanted to make her life better than what I had, better than mine. And I understand where that's coming from. A lot of you grew up facing significant challenges, maybe financial hardships, lack of opportunities, emotional neglect, etc., etc., etc. So you made a vow to yourself, I will give my children everything I never had. And that's an incredibly loving and generous mindset. But here's where things can get complicated. When we focus so much on giving our kids what we didn't have, we miss what they actually might need from us. Let me read that again. When we focus so much on giving our children what we didn't have, we might miss what they actually needed from us. You may have provided material stability, the best education, opportunities you only dreamed of, but that doesn't always translate into emotional connection. And I hear this so often. I hear this from the parents. I gave them everything. Why don't they appreciate it? And this brings me to the first point I want to dive into today, the common feeling of I did everything to make her life better. I hear this all the time, and it's valid. It's so valid. You worked incredibly hard to provide for your child in ways you may have never experienced yourself. But that's the disconnect. While material things like providing a great education, financial stability, the best house, the best college, the best trips and opportunities are important, they don't always meet the deeper emotional needs that your child may have. In all of my work with parents is on helping them to understand the emotional needs of their child that were not met and or are still not being met. Okay? For many estranged adult children, their need goes beyond the tangible things. They want to feel emotionally connected, validated, and understood. There's that whole see me, hear me, validate me. And that can be hard to grasp, especially when you've done so much to provide for them physically and materially. From the generation many of the parents that I work with grew up in, love was often equated with providing. How many heard this, about putting food on the table, a roof over your kid's head, and giving them opportunities you never had? But for your child's generation, love is often seen through emotional attunement, feeling understood, being seen, and having a space to express their emotions openly. And when that emotional connection is missing, no amount of material provisions can fill that gap. They just can't. You can have all the material possessions in the world. And as the old saying goes, money can't buy love. That love is an emotional connection. So let's talk about the common misunderstandings around what right, quote unquote, right means. For a lot of parents, doing everything, quote unquote, right means giving your children the material things you lacked, making sure they have a comfortable life, good education, financial security, and that's noble. It's admirable. But here's the tricky part. It doesn't always translate into emotional support. From your child's perspective, what they may need may have been more emotional connection. Opportunities, but opportunities to express their feelings, more moments of being heard and validated. And this can be confusing because you work so hard to give them everything you thought they needed. And hello, nobody taught you. Nobody taught you about your emotions. Nobody taught you about how to show up as a parent with emotional connection. So, how are you to know? Right? For mothers, the mindset is if I give her what I didn't have, I'll be the perfect mom. But what if your kid needed something different than what you gave? What if what they needed wasn't more material things, but more emotional presence? That's the heart of the misunderstanding between generations, and it's where a lot of hurt stems from. And this brings us to generational differences and how love is expressed. Again, you grew up, most likely, older generations, with the belief that love was shown through actions, through doing things for your family, providing for them, giving them what they needed to succeed. Basically, the basics of life, right? Help your dad clean out the garage, help your dad go harvest whatever crop was there, right? Like through actions and helping. But for younger generations, such as your child's, love is often felt through that emotional connection. It's about vulnerability, emotional support, and feeling understood. It's not that you don't love your kid, right? You absolutely do. You did. You still do. But love today is shown differently. Because here's the thing, most of our kids can buy all the material possessions, right? That they want. They're searching for that emotional connection. That's one thing that money can't buy. While you might believe if I give her everything I didn't have, I'll be the perfect mom. Your daughter may say she wasn't the perfect mom for me. I needed more emotional closeness. She might have wanted you to ask her how she was feeling, to be present with her in an emotional way that went beyond providing that physical security. And again, as I always say, this isn't about pointing fingers and placing blame. It's simply acknowledging that love looks different depending on the generation and individual needs. Each of your children are different. Generations are different. Life does not look today like it looked 50 years ago, right? Things are different. We must change with the times. So let's talk about emotional needs versus material needs. This is where a lot of estranged relationships get stuck. As mothers, typically you've provided everything you thought your child needed, but those emotional needs often go unspoken and unrecognized, especially if your own emotional needs were not met in your childhood. It's easy to focus on providing what you lacked materially, but in doing so, your child's emotional needs might have been overlooked. And this isn't intentional. It's not about being a bad parent. It's about trying to give what you didn't have and not realizing your child might need something different. Many of the moms that I work with were trying to give their kids what they themselves missed out on growing up. But what your child may have needed was that emotional support, the validation, or just, hello, listen to me. The needs that went far beyond financial or material stability, right? And I'm guilty of this myself. My kids wanted me to tune in and I was tuning them out. I got to get dinner on the stove. I got to make the grocery list for tomorrow. I got to make the whatever that's needed for the class party tomorrow. Make sure you can take your bath. Make sure, there were things that had to be done. And I was so tuned out. I was not there for them emotionally. And then that carried through into young adulthood because I was still managing the relationship instead of being there emotionally for my daughters. Okay. Um, that space to be heard is everything. So how do we move forward from here? How do we start to heal this disconnect? Well, it begins, as where most things begin in this world of estrangement, with reflection. Many of the moms that I work with haven't fully processed their own childhood pain, and so everything their kid is basically throwing back at them is it's pushing their pain buttons, their emotional pain buttons for the parent. So maybe you didn't receive the emotional nurturing you needed growing up, and without realizing it, that impacted how you parented. So to start healing, I encourage you to reflect on your own childhood. What were your emotional needs? How did your upbringing shape the way that you parented? And don't tell me you didn't have emotional needs. I don't believe it. I don't, don't. All human beings need an emotional connection. And we as children seek it out with our primary caregivers, usually parents first. By doing this deeper work, whether through journaling, therapy, coaching, or simple self reflection, you can begin to see how maybe your past influenced your parenting. And this insight can help you to understand why the disconnect happened and why your kid may have needed something different. This reflection is deeply important, as is doing the work. And reflection is part of doing the work. Okay. I encourage you to reflect through compassionate curiosity versus judgment. Okay. Lastly, let's talk about empathy and compassion, not just for your child, but also for yourself. When we understand our own experiences and how they shaped us, it becomes easier to see things from your child's perspective. When I see an estranged parent who is not able to see their child's perspective, I know that they haven't done healing work on for their own childhood experiences or young adulthood. It's clear. And with those folks that I coach, I see that all the time. And they don't see it generally coming into coaching. But the more that we talk, the more that we reflect, the more that we unravel, the more of, the layers of the onion we peel back, they start to say, oh my God, I had no idea. Right? It's not about blaming yourself or feeling guilty. It's about offering yourself the same compassion you would offer anyone else. If you cannot connect with your own pain, You'll be more likely to extend empathy when you can connect with your own pain. You'll be more likely to extend empathy and understanding to your adult child. And that's where the healing begins. Empathy and compassion are the bridge that can help you to start rebuilding the emotional connection with your adult child. So again, empathy and compassion are the bridge that can help you to start rebuilding the emotional connection with your child. And that empathy and compassion is hard to come by when we haven't connected with our own pain, our pain from our childhood. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with this thought. There is no perfect mom. I'm here to tell you, you are human. By default, it means you are imperfect. There is no perfect mother. Not you, not your adult daughter, not your daughter-in-law. I'm sorry, any adult daughters or daughter-in-laws listening here today. None of us are perfect. All of us make mistakes. If there's one thing I've learned from my own experience as both a mom and a coach, is that parenting is an ongoing journey of growth and learning. The more we are willing to look inward, the more we can heal and reconnect in healthy ways with our adult children. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know these conversations aren't easy. They're hard, but they are so very necessary. If this episode resonated with you and you'd like to explore these topics more, would like to consider individual coaching with me, please reach out. I'm here to support you. theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent and that you were able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.